as you work on your project, your application is going to do countless things. It'll fire events, it'll send email, it'll perform database queries. It will log or dump data for debugging purposes. It'll dispatch jobs. It'll interact with Redis or the cache. It's going to do so many things. And it can be difficult sometimes because you can't exactly see when it's happening. The best you can do is trigger an action and then go to the database and see, did something change that you expected? Or maybe you go into the Redis console. But instead, you could use Laravel Telescope, which is a first-party package by the creators of Laravel. So I'll show you how to pull this in to any of your projects. And I seriously recommend it for just about every use case. So we'll go to github.com/laravel/telescope, and we have some basic instructions here to get started. I'm going to go ahead and pull it in as a dev dependency. Now, while that's doing its thing, if we switch back, we can see once we have it installed, we need to trigger this artisan command. Among other things, that will create a configuration file, it'll add a service provider, and it will also prepare a database migration class. So after that, we will migrate the database to build up the necessary tables. Anyways, if we switch back, there we go. So now if I run PHP Artisan, you'll see it has automatically registered itself with Laravel, so we can now install the package. Okay, so it has now published the following files to your main application: the provider, some assets, and the configuration file. So if you'd like to take a look at that, let's switch back. You'll now have a config/telescope file. And among other things, you can modify all of the watchers if you need to. Otherwise, ignore that. Next, in your providers directory, you'll have a new Telescope service provider. Now, by default, Telescope is only accessible in the local environment. But you can also say here, if you have a specific user, like in this case, maybe Jeffrey@laracast.com. Or let's go to my database users. Yeah, here's one I have. Let's give that account permission to view the dashboard. Okay, anyways, next we can go ahead and migrate the database. Okay, let's take a look. Give this a refresh, and you now have 3 new tables for the entries, any tags, and anything that you happen to be monitoring. All right, cool. So we're all set here. I can now go to project.test/telescope. And there we go. It's installed and ready to go. So you can see this play button here, or we can of course pause it. But by default, it's going to continuously monitor your application for any number of events, like I said. Anything related to queries, or events, or emails sent, or notifications, or things you are caching or fetching, or Redis interaction, or jobs, or scheduling. There's really a lot at play here. So let's just give this a shot. I will open a new tab, we will visit our site, and you can now see we can load new entries, and we have a request here. Now, if we do go to /projects, all right, let's switch back. We have new entries. So immediately we can see the basic requests that are taking place. Here are the specifics of that request. You can even view the queries here, or you can click it here. But do know this is just a huge dump of all queries that have been executed. So that means whenever, once again, I'll give it a refresh, whenever you make a new request, you can immediately dig down and view all of the queries that were executed as part of that request. Very useful. You can, of course, review anything in the headers, anything you happen to have in the session, and the response. Okay, so let's see. We'll go to our projects controller. And let's just say right here, this index method, this corresponds to this page. So here, let's say you're trying to figure out, okay, well, what exactly do we have for projects? Well, we can do 2 things. You can return projects, like I said, and that will be cast to JSON, and then you view it directly in the browser. Or we can use this dump command. Now, what's going to happen behind the scenes is Laravel uses a Symfony tool called var dumper to handle this. And as part of that, Telescope hooks into that dump process and stores it for your review. So if I give it a refresh and then switch back, we'll go to our dumps tab. There we go. Now, a bit more cleanly, we can debug the application. And we can see, all right, here is what we have currently for projects. And if we were to ever change that, maybe we were to only take 1 and get the results. Take the first result. Okay, we give this a refresh. And now we'll have a new tab here, and we can see we grabbed exactly 1 item there. Or you can view the query that was executed. Select all from the projects, but limit 1 item. Or limit 2 items. Let's come back. We have a new one. You get the idea. Now you can also put things into the cache. And we haven't yet reviewed this. We'll tackle it at the end of the series. But as a quick primer, I could say, cache, I want to remember forever some basic stats. Now, often this will perform database queries and things like that, time-consuming steps that don't need to be executed for every request. Instead, you can do it one time or one time per day, something like that. And maybe if it were Laracast, I could say, figure out how many lessons are in the database or how many hours of learning are available or how many series. You get the idea. Now, we don't have to perform what would in real life be a bunch of database queries to calculate that. Anyways, if we now come back and give this a refresh, we should now have a new cache tab. And here we go. So we did set a new key in the cache called stats. And again, we can dig down and review that. So if I scroll down, here is what was placed into the cache. And of course, we can now fetch that forever. I could say cache, give me what you have for stats. And there we go. Useful. So this means if we switch back, if you ever try to fetch anything, that too will be recorded. So you could grab that. You could even dump it if you're in a debugging state. Okay, so now we refresh, and here we go. We have dumped this data, but we could also review that here. So we made a hit to fetch the data associated with that key. Let's test out mailing real quick. So let's say, I don't know, after you create a new project, maybe you want to fire off an email to the administrator or to the person, whatever you decide. We could say mail to, and we'll just do myself. And we're going to send, and we haven't yet reviewed this, but you're getting a quick primer here in a number of areas. We will build up a new email. So if I run PHP Artisan, you'll see there is a make mail command. Okay, take a look at this. PHP Artisan make mail, and we'll call it project created. Okay, you'll now find this in your app directory, mail. Here is the boilerplate you get. So as part of building or constructing this email, you can see it loads a view. So if we say resources, views, I don't have anything here. And of course, I could create a directory. I could say, for example, mail.project created. But take a look at this. If I run it again, but we use the help command, we can see if we add the -m flag, it will create a new markdown template for the mailable. Okay, so why don't we give that a shot? I'm going to delete this and do it one more time. So now I will add the markdown flag, and in the views directory, I'm going to call it mail and then a view of project created. Okay, so now we'll get the same thing again. But if I scroll down, you'll see it does load a specific view here, and it does scaffold one for you, a basic email. So now I want to see what this looks like. In the projects controller, after I create a new project, I will instantiate a new instance of project created. And I'm going to import that at the top. App, mail, project created. Now, we'll add specifics later, but just know in real life, you could send through, for example, the project that was constructed, and then you can use that data as part of the email template. In our case, though, I'm not going to bother. Okay, so let's see what happens. When you construct a new project, we'll validate the request, we'll create the project, and we will fire off an email called project created. Now, at the moment, that simply loads a view, so this is what will be sent to the user. New project. You can modify it however you want. Okay, let's give this a shot. So back to Safari, I'm going to create a new project, like so, but it fails. Notice we get a 530. And this is because we're trying to send an email, but we haven't yet configured how we want email to be sent. So this is where we return to our .env file. You'll see at the moment, it's suggesting and recommending that you use a service called Mailtrap, which is great. But instead, I'm just going to do a log driver, which means for any email that is sent, log it to a file. And specifically, it will go into the storage directory, logs, and in this case, it would go here. Okay, let's give that another shot. I'll give it a refresh, and there we go. So we have created a new project, but now what about the email? Well, again, I could go into that log file, go to the very bottom, and I can see that, but it's not overly helpful. So again, this is where Telescope can help me. In the mail directory, it did pick up that we fired off a new email, and if I scroll down, now I can see specifically what was sent. So while we're here, why don't we customize that? I'm going to go back to Project Created. Let's say in order to construct this email, we do need to know a little bit about the project that you created. So we can accept that through the constructor. And let me clean up. Now, as it turns out, any public properties that you have on your Mailable class will instantly be available within your view. So when I pass this through, the Project Created view will instantly have access to a project property. All right, so let's go to that file, Project Created, and we'll say New Project, and we'll say, I had that project object. Let me spit out the name of the project and then the description. Then we could say View Project, and this would then have a URL to where you can view that project. So let's say project / and then concat the project ID. Okay, we're about ready to try this out. But remember, because we now expect project through the constructor, I need to make sure in project's controller we pass it. So right here, we'll pass it. And we're all set to go. So, and real quick, let's make sure we get rid of that. Okay, so one more time, I will create a new project. Maybe you're writing a book, and we will spit out some generic text there. All right, so now we have our new project. And if I switch back, we should now have it recorded here. So just now, we fired off this email, and here's the email that has the specifics of the project we just created. There it is. Really cool. Okay, so I think you get the basic idea. You can review everything else on your own, but do consider Telescope to be your companion when constructing an application. So until further notice, other than maybe throwaway projects, I'd recommend pulling this in for just about every single application you construct.